What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our stuff, we create content like what you're watching right now to educate and engage individuals like yourself on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. Now, my name is Captain Nostalgia. I have the privilege of being a writer, podcaster, events coordinator, and more here with the organization. If you guys would like more on our nonprofit efforts, podcasts, more reviews like this one, and most importantly, our mental health resource along with our social media and more, links are in the descriptions below. For this Sundance review, we're actually going to be talking about the latest movie from the directing duo Moorehead and Benson. We get too long into the review, I just want to mention that we did an entire episode on their last feature, Synchronic, as well as sat down with them last year to talk about the movie. All of that is going to be in the descriptions below. And just a side note, before we get into this movie, I highly recommend this movie. It is wonderful, and I do believe it's streaming on Netflix. Something in the dirt. Where to start on this plot synopsis? Something in the Dirt is a COVID project that also stars Benson and Moorehead as the two protagonists of this movie that are essentially setting out to make a documentary after a weird occurrence happens in one of their apartments. Is it real? Is it a myth? That's what they're trying to figure out. Something in the Dirt is unlike any other movie that I have seen in a long time. It has quite a unique visual style to it. It has a really unique flair for its cinematography, but also at the same point, its narrative in and of itself is bananas. Before we get talking about that, let me brag on these guys right here. So not only are they directing this, not only did one of them write the script for this, not only are they producers, they're also the two stars that drive this movie. Honestly, I'm not too familiar with their filmography outside of Synchronic. I really liked Synchronic, and when I was doing some research last night into their filmography, this isn't the first time that they have starred in their own movie. But for me, this was the first time that I'd ever actually seen their acting chops and kind of getting to see a lot more of their creative process. The fact that these two people play neighbors who become friends, who become documentarians, to kind of deconstruct this wild phenomena is really interesting because it feels like the film is kind of meta in that it gives you a inside look into their own relationship as directors and as content creators. I really liked their chemistry, and so much of what makes this movie so authentic is their relationship throughout the course of the film, because I feel like sometimes in these circumstances you get like two or more people together that are working together, and you get that kind of like friendship, getting to know you kind of thing, but you never really kind of get that raw emotional vulnerability that I feel like outside of Blair Witch Project, it doesn't really feel authentic. Whereas this film feels authentic. There are fights that happen throughout the film between these two characters. Like, they're constantly friends, but the fights that just kind of go on back and forth between these characters, it feels real and it feels natural, which makes this film kind of have a little bit more of that documentarian feel that very few films that are in the genre actually are able to pull off. And it's not just that. It's the fact that this film is surprisingly deep, but also at the same time, it's surprisingly funny. Tonally speaking, this film feels like an extended episode of The X-Files, which I absolutely love. But I think at the same time, what really makes this movie fantastic isn't just its chemistry between its characters and its authenticity. It's these pockets of vulnerability and humor. I'll talk on the humor for real quick. The humor, it just absolutely every time there is a joke that comes through, it always catches me off guard. Because there are certain situations that happen within the movie where you don't expect to laugh, and because you're not expecting it, you laugh even harder. And on top of that, like there are things that as these characters are kind of unfolding and you're kind of getting to see their true colors, they're getting fleshed out. What really works really well is the fact that yes, the character development is done extraordinarily well in this, but there's a lot of heart and humanity that Benson and Moorehead as actors are able to bring to these characters, so they're not just necessarily telling you stuff, but you're going through these emotions with these characters. And the science fiction aspect of this movie, because it's like, I would best describe this movie as a science fiction comedy with mockumentary tendencies. Science fiction aspect is kind of where it loses me sometimes as a viewer, and I love science, but science has to be like explained to me like Oscar explains finances to Michael Scott. Like, make it simple. Like, make it super duper simple. This was not my strongest subject in school, and it continues to also haunt me in life. I think the way that they explain it, though, like, it's really good, but then they have these tendencies to go down these rabbit holes of conspiracies. And so this film, in the end, it kind of suffers from the same thing that some documentaries do, and also conspiracy theories do as well. And at the prevention of spoilers, I will not say anything more than that. It's when they go down these just deep rabbit holes that this film really tends to lag, because they take a thread of the conspiracy and they just go see how far down they can dig. And I feel like, to me, it distracts from the overall plot of the movie. But with those rabbit trails, it also presents something that I really loved about this film that makes it so unique, is its visual style. Because this film is done, it showcases like home movies of Moorehead and Benson, but also at the same time, like, you're also kind of getting to see these like really rich but like somewhat stock style retellings of everything. You know, the thing that documentaries do when they do recreations. Yeah, this film does that really well. But probably one of my biggest complaints about this too is that, and this is a very minor complaint, but I mean, when you do a film of this scale, sometimes you need a budget that's going to match that scale. And it's really no fault of Benson or Moorehead. The visual representation of these conspiracies don't always look the best. You could still feel like the budgetary restrictions, and while it's not a complaint, it is worth noting that it doesn't take anything away from the movie overall, but it does kind of cheapen it a little bit. This movie does documentary styles really well. One of my favorite horror movies of the 21st century is the Poughkeepsie Tapes, and if you haven't seen it, it's quite a unique movie. I highly recommend it. It's a mockumentary that flies often below the radar, but there's a sense of warmth, and that film, to me, I feel like from a mockumentary, captures a real authentic feeling of what true crime documentaries do really well. And I've seen movies like Something in the Dirt that have kind of taken that style over the years, but have never really been successful at doing it until now. There is a documentary portion of this film that I feel like is done really well. The camera, the lighting, the visual representation, it just flows really well. I'm going to stop talking about this movie because I feel like I am edging towards spoilers, and honestly, the less you know about this movie, the better it's going to be. And I know I've said that about a lot of these Sundance movies, but for this one in particular, this movie caught me off guard in so many ways, and it's because I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting, but I can also say that this is the best quarantine movie that I've seen yet. And yes, that includes Shudder's Host, because while that movie is great, it doesn't necessarily have the rewatchability that Something in the Dirt has. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a solid 4 out of 5. I really loved this movie. I think that Benson and Moorehead, both on screen and off screen, just showcase not only their talents, but how they are two of the most underappreciated creators working in Hollywood today. This movie is charming. It is beautiful, and my only problem with it sometimes is that sometimes it can go a little off the rails, and it does run on a little bit too long. But overall, like it balances itself really well and constantly surprising you. Now for our mental health moment. If you guys are new to our content, mental health moment is where we will take a theme of mental health woven throughout the film, and we'll expand upon it in just the last few moments of the video to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. And for this one of our protagonists has a reminder of one of his darkest times. Again, the less you know, the better. And I'm really just going to leave it at that, because I think it reminds, even without context, you're reminded that sometimes the worst thing we have ever done is just constantly looms over us. We feel like we can't grow, and we feel like we can't evolve as people because of this continually black cloud over us. I just want to speak to that for a few moments and say that you are not your depression, you are not your anxiety, you are not your suicidal tendencies, you are not your self-harm, you are not your addiction, you are not the worst thing that you've ever done. And I don't know how or why you feel like you've taken up identity and residence in those things, but just know that you are not alone. The last time I checked, there are over 17 million diagnosed adults that suffer with depression. There are over 132 suicides that take place each and every day. And for every one of those successful suicides, there are 25 more that have been attempted as well. The rates of addiction, the rates of self-harm, these are things that are high. But no one understands two things. First, that there is hope, and two, that you're not alone. I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but in the descriptions below where you guys are watching this right now, there are access links to our mental health resource library. And I want to encourage any one of you that is currently going through that to check those out, because there's always someone out there that's willing to listen to you. So I thank you guys. We have one more coming up for Sundance, and make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so when we publish content, you guys don't miss it. Have a great day.